Lantana is the most widely distributed invasive plant in the world now, destroying habitats across Australia, Asia, and Africa. It completely displaces all the native vegetation. So it snuffs out the local plants
Mm.
and it also displaces animals because they have less fodder to eat. So it's a huge kind of biodiversity problem. It also inhibits the growth of trees.
Mm.
So the carbon sequestration potential of a forest starts reducing if it's taken over by lantana underneath. But we are seeing how we can convert this into a solution. This huge global problem, how can it be a solution? So we now have 300 indigenous people who have gained a livelihood from this almost full time, making these elephant sculptures.
Mm.
The sculptures are traveling around the world talking about this idea of coexistence, which is connecting people back with nature and
Mm.
trying to say there are people in India living with elephants. What can you live with better around you everywhere in the world? They're also removing lantana from the forest a little bit. And they are creating a fund to support human wildlife coexistence projects in India and around the world. But our current venture is actually looking at how we can extract the whole plant, pulverize it, convert it into biochar, and bury it. So we employ another 1,000 people hopefully in the next 5 years, sequester about 30,000 tons of carbon per year,
Mm.
and you clear about 500 hectares of lantana from the forests and improve the livelihoods of a large number of farmers through more sustainable agricultural
Mm.
practices and reduced needs for fertilizer and input costs. Usually in art exhibitions, people say don't touch, stay
Mm.
away, but we encourage people to touch. Here we let people climb on them as well.
Okay.
The question is, when will we run out of lantana?
Hmm. If you're a resident of Bangalore, you've probably seen or heard of the Great Elephant Migration. These beautiful lifelike elephant sculptures that were displayed in the city and are now making their way across the world. At the heart of these sculptures is an effort to address pressing conservation and climate issues, that of indigenous livelihoods, human elephant coexistence, and invasive species. Today on the Boring Climate podcast, we have Dr. Tarsh Thekaekara, among the people behind this project. Tarsh is a researcher conservationist focusing on developing human inclusive models of nature conservation. With a PhD from the British Open University and an MSc from the University of Oxford, he is director of the Rare Elephant Collective and trustee of the Shola Trust. His areas of research include studying the invasive Lantana camera plant, mapping them in South India's forests, while also looking at ways in which the local communities can use them. He also investigates how people and elephants share space in Gudalur in the Nilgiris. Welcome to the show, Tarsh.
Thanks, Sushila.
So we'll begin with why invasive plant species are a problem. So to ground our listeners, could you tell us a bit about what invasive plant species are?
So, broadly, invasives are species that have come from one place to another, that have been moved by humans from one place to another, and they are able to outcompete the native plant species in that area and start taking over and spreading extensively. Um, People moved plants across the world a lot. Hyder Ali in Lalbagh, for example, every visiting dignitary brought him plants,
Okay.
but not all of them turn invasive.
Hmm.
Some of them are able to take over and spread naturally on their own and completely colonize natural spaces without human aid, and that's when we call them invasive plants.
Right. And the lantana camera, which is the focus of your study, is among the worst of the lot. But they're not native to India. So how
No.
did they come here and what are
So
they? Yeah.
lantana was brought as an ornamental shrub by the
Hmm.
British from South America, South and Central America, via Europe. It came to India. It was first planted in the gardens of Calcutta. It's a great ornamental shrub if you think about it. It's toxic, so cows and goats and all that don't eat it, which when you plant it as a hedgerow, it's really hardy, it doesn't need water. If you do water it, it flowers nicely all through the year. So it's a perfect kind of plant for a garden. They first planted it there in 1809. The first record of it in South India was 1829 in Uti,
Okay.
around the stone house. So it's evident that somebody brought it from there and planted it as an ornamental plant in Uti. And by the 1900s, it was a huge problem across the country.
Hmm.
So it completely, in about 100 years, it's completely started taking over forests everywhere.
And it's taken over a large part of our conserved forests in the Western Ghats. And according to the UN, a recent report, such invasive plants are a major driver of biodiversity loss. So, could you take us through how the lantana is causing biodiversity loss and how it's affecting the wildlife and eventually, I mean, the climate of that system?
Yeah. So for the most part, lantana is the perfect invader. It's allelopathic, which means it puts out chemicals that suppress the growth of other
Hmm.
plants. It's toxic, so no native herbivores can eat it. And it just starts taking over more and more.
Hmm.
If you cut it, it coppices and grows 6 times faster than the mother plant. So there's
Okay.
one stem, you cut it, it grows 6 times faster, and there's multiple stems. It makes a very thick, impenetrable kind of thicket.
Hmm.
And there's a huge seed bank in the ground. So even if you uproot it, the seeds all start germinating. So it is really bad. It's the top invasive plant in the world now, the most widely distributed outside of the Americas. It's invasive almost everywhere, all over Australia, Africa, and Asia. Only the black rat as a species is more invasive, more spread
Okay.
out than lantana.
Okay.
Otherwise, lantana is the most widely distributed.
Hmm.
So it basically displaces all of the native vegetation. So animals have nothing much to eat, and they are kind of pushed out of forests more. About 40% of forests in South India are taken over by dense lantana. Only about 10% is free of lantana. Broadly, it invades the wetter forests and the drier forests less.
Hmm.
So it's not a real problem in either the dry forests or the wet forests. It's primarily a problem in the deciduous forests in between, where it just completely takes over and outcompetes everything else.
Right. So among your work in the last few years is two major themes. One is forest restoration, and the other is indigenous livelihoods. And the more popular part of this is the great elephant migration, which kind of used the lantana plant to build these sculptures. Could you tell us more about why this came up and where the elephants are now?
Yeah, sure. So we started in 2007 without really understanding much of the problem to make furniture. It
Mm,
seemed like a nice thing. You make furniture, you remove invasives, you give people a livelihood.
mm,
But very soon we found nobody was really buying this furniture because it was cheap imitation of cane. And
mm,
cane is a superior product in that sense. It's more even, it bends more smoothly, it's stronger than lantana in the long term. So it wasn't really working. People were occasionally buying furniture, but it was primarily diehard conservationists who liked the story of it
mm.
more than the beauty of the furniture. It was never going to be mainstream. So in 2010-12, when I was in the UK, I found a charity called Elephant Family, a person called Ruth Ganesh, who was doing these incredible citywide exhibitions.
Okay.
It wasn't a small kind of exhibition in some corner, which is what most kind of NGO things are. This was small painted elephant sculptures across London, and I was hugely excited by it. And I pitched to them later that, listen, these are really nice, but finally these are fiber elephants. We can make elephants out of lantana, which will be a
Mm,
really exciting medium to make it with. She got really excited because at the same time she was actively looking for other materials that were more sustainable and told a story. That's how this came together. So 2015 we started on the first prototypes. We made a couple of elephants. My PhD was on elephant personality, so we knew individual elephants. We had hundreds of
okay.
photos of individual elephants. So each of the elephants is modeled on a real wild elephant. Um, so that's how that started. In the first few years, from giving the community about 20-30 lakhs of livelihood in the first, say, 7 years of making furniture, the elephants now employ 300 people, and they get a total livelihood of over 3 crores a year.
Nice.
So it's doing really well in terms of providing a livelihood at scale. And everyone who sees the elephants everywhere are inspired by them. And for us, that's really nice. We recently had the team who make the elephants also travel to the US. They were in Beverly Hills,
Okay.
and the whole team interacted with a lot of celebrities there. And it was nice for them to see how excited everyone was by the elephants. Everywhere they go, people have a very kind of visceral, embodied reaction of
Mm,
absolutely loving them and wanting to go up and touch them and things like that. Usually in art exhibitions, people say, don't touch, stay
mm,
away, but we encourage people to touch. Here, we let people climb on them as well.
okay.
There, because of liability issues, we say don't climb on them, you may fall off and get into trouble. But we encourage people to interact with the sculpture as much as possible, and they've done a phenomenal job in kind of raising awareness about these problems. And finally the elephants are sold as well, and the money is put back into conservation India. So it's created a fund that supports a range of projects in India and other parts of the world as well.
Right. So you mentioned the community as being the heart of this. And these are specifically for indigenous communities in the Tamil Nadu region, right? Could you tell us a bit about how they work on this and how they have benefited over
Yeah.
the past few years? Yeah.
So we have, yeah, it's four communities spread across Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. It's that whole
Okay.
belt. I mean, these boundaries are slightly arbitrary
Mm,
that were created. The Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, that kind of mountainous area south of Bangalore, was inhabited by a range of indigenous people who
mm,
have been completely marginalized and sidelined over the years with influx of more and more people into those
mm,
landscapes. The Nilgiris had no outsiders other than the indigenous people. Now the indigenous people are barely 10% of the population.
mm,
Um, so the idea was these were the traditional stewards of the forest. They used to look after these forests and manage them without any intervention. how can we create a positive way in which they are still involved in forest conservation as well. So that's been the focus. So there are the Katanaikins, Paniyas, and Betakurumbas in the Nilgiris. There are Paniyas as well in Wayanad, and there are Soligas in Hills and BR Hills in
mm,
Karnataka. That's the kind of belt that we work in. And the challenge learning from the furniture was that people are not going to work in a factory setup.
mm,
Like they like to work in their house in more autonomous, diverse ways.
mm,
None of them are going to drop all their livelihoods. They collect wild foods, they go for wage labor occasionally, they do a range of activities, honey when it's the season.
mm,
They're never going to drop all of that and do one activity. So the way we set up is that it's a group of about 10 or 15 people who together work on an elephant. They drop in and out themselves a lot.
mm.
But finally, the elephant is made on time. We have to get
Right.
each elephant done in 2 months at
Mm,
least. So it was quite a challenge in building this distributed network of manufacturing in some sense without trying to set up a factory.
mm,
So it's a range of in autonomous Adivasi units spread across all these areas. There are 25 units now.
mm.
The frames are centralized. We make
Okay.
these steel frames. They're sent out to all these villages. The people cover them in lantana, and they come back for that final quality check and finishing the eyes, the toenails,
Mm,
the ears, the varnish, checking
mm.
the whole thing once more. So it's been an interesting model to figure out how you can scale in a distributed way rather
Right.
than have a huge number of people working in one factory.
Mm,
And we're quite pleased with how that's turned out. It's quite a large number of people now who are all quite enjoying their work, I hope.
right.
And it's also given them a much better status,
Mm,
both locally and with the forest department and with government officials and all that. Everybody knows of the elephants and knows that it's a source of pride for all of these people.
right. So you mentioned that the elephant traveling across, and the money that comes from that supports other initiatives, and one of those things is a more technical kind of building a lantana ecosystem, which involves cultivating the lantana biomass and using it for fuel wood or biochar. So in terms of climate, could you kind of give us a brief on what biochar is and what are its carbon benefits, sequestration
Yeah.
benefits?
So biochar for me has always been exciting. It's a very ancient technology that's been
Mm,
rediscovered now. People in the Amazon basin had pockets of really fertile soil,
mm,
and when they kind of examined why that was, it was because they had made charcoal, mixed it with organic fertilizers, and buried it. So you
mm,
had pockets of really fertile soil that remained fertile for many years.
right.
You didn't have to do the slash and burn every
Mm,
year, kind of find new soil. So that's the origin of biochar, terra preta soils from 4,000 years ago.
mm.
So we were quite excited by this. In 2010, when we were starting the Shola Trust, we then only tried to do biochar on a
Okay.
very small scale in a village, make these little drums and stuff. But it wasn't really working. The
Mm,
cost of harvesting the lantana, getting it out, all of that was
right.
more than the value of the charcoal. So we kind of shelved that then. But now we are getting back into biochar. The basic story is that the elephants themselves have created a huge livelihood,
Mm,
but they're not really clearing huge areas of the forest of lantana. There is so much lantana. Every
right.
park has, like I was saying, 30 to 50%.
Mm,
So that's Bandipur is 50,000 hectares, BRT is 25,000 hectares, Mudumala is 30,000
mm,
hectares. So we haven't cleared any lantana from the forest in making the elephants, to be honest. It's
mm,
raised awareness about it, but manually they have cleared separately. But
right.
for the craft itself, you only use sticks that are straight. You can't
Mm,
use the whole plant,
right.
and it's very expensive to clear the whole plant. So we've developed kind of ecologically appropriate machines that go and pull out the plants with the roots. So it's basically a
Okay.
tractor based winch that you tie belts to the plants and pulls out all the plants with the roots.
Okay.
So minimize soil disturbance, but also get the roots out. And then you pulverize the whole plant so it can be transported. So you
Mm,
have powdered biomass that you transport out.
mm,
Now the thing is, there is a huge biomass industry in India. Fuel wood, briquettes, all of that. You
correct.
can sell biomass for anything,
Mm,
particle boards. There are a wide range of uses.
yeah.
But the problem is you have to compete with agricultural waste, which is almost free,
Mm,
right? You're from your rice husk to your coconut fronds to a whole lot of agricultural biomass is there.
right.
The farmers are done with. It's just from the farm you have to pick it up and take it to wherever factory
Right.
and pay some minimal amount to the farmer. Here it's a lot more work to extract it from the forest. It's a thorny plant. It's hard to deal with. Bring it out, the logistics, the rain, the elephants knock over the tractors
Mhm.
if you leave them overnight.
Yeah.
All these challenges are there. So this biomass ends up being a little more expensive than any other biomass that there is on the market.
Okay.
That's inevitable. So you have to find a value for the biomass that provides you with more money.
Mm,
So the basic benchmark is about 3 rupees a kilo. This costs about 5 rupees a kilo.
okay.
So the only thing that can do this is perhaps biochar, because uh, you are going to offset carbon.
Hmm.
put carbon back into the ground, you're going to give people a livelihood, you're going to remove lantana from the forests. So the hope is that those carbon credits will provide more money than
Hmm.
your traditional kind of carbon credits, which are just based on agricultural waste. The
Correct.
social and environmental impact of these credits will be much greater.
Right.
So we're hoping that that will offset it. Biochar for me is really exciting, primarily even from a climate perspective,
Hmm.
because all the rest of these solutions, in my view, are hogwash.
Hmm.
You are kind of initially it was solar panels and wind farms.
Hmm.
You are not going to pollute, so you get a credit for that,
Hmm.
right? With trees, which is the rage, the trees grow and they're going to absorb carbon.
Hmm.
But when they die, they're going to release that carbon. There's no other way around it. Like that is part of a cyclic process that has always been happening,
Right.
right? If you look at what's happening over the last 400 million years, uh, the earth has slowly been putting kind of oil back into the ground, right? Biomass carbon has been slowly converting into oil.
Hmm.
In the last 400 years, we are pulling that out and putting that into the atmosphere. None of these cyclic processes on the surface of the planet, tree growing, are going to change this, that we're actually pulling carbon out of the ground.
Correct.
We have to be physically putting carbon back into the ground.
Hmm.
And the only way to do that is biochar. You're
Hmm.
physically capturing any plant that grows, produces carbon, locks it into its biomass. You convert that into biochar and put it back. It's the only way to physically put carbon back into the ground.
Right.
Other than these other new direct capture technologies are coming back, but I don't, rock weathering and other
Hmm.
kind of stuff, but I don't know if any of them are as tangible and proven as biochar, which is 4,000 years old.
Right.
The challenge is to make it in a modern context where there are no harmful emissions. Carbon
Hmm.
monoxide comes out if you don't make it well. You
Right.
basically have to burn the biomass in a low oxygen environment or no oxygen environment, so that full pyrolysis doesn't happen. And then instead of getting ash, you're left with the charcoal.
Right.
So there are more sophisticated high-tech machines now to do this in sealed control environments, and we are just setting up that, and it's quite exciting that that is going to take off in a new way.
Right.
So if that works, then we will start clearing at least 500 hectares per park per year. We will provide another 1,000 livelihoods.
Hmm.
We can bury up to 30,000 tons of CO2 back into the ground every year,
Nice.
and that will kind of take off another trajectory that hopefully will grow in a kind of more
Hmm.
spread out way. Our model is very much that we kind of develop R&D and D and technology and try to partner with as many people as possible
Hmm.
to roll this out.
Right.
So we're quite excited about that and the implications that can have in kind of yeah, checking so many boxes.
Right.
Farmers' livelihood will increase through
Hmm.
better soil health and
Hmm.
agricultural outputs. Sustainable agriculture itself, so amounts of chemicals and pollutants going into into the uh, ecosystem will reduce, particularly in like the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, which is a really fragile kind of
Yeah.
ecosystem. It's getting hammered by pesticides and chemical
Hmm.
fertilizers. Um, Indigenous people gain a livelihood. Lantana is cleared, forest is restored, grasslands are brought back, and that helps animals as well.
Right.
So if this all works, it will be really exciting.
Yeah. So, what is the potential of biochar with respect to carbon credits generated?
So carbon credits are slightly controversial in that it allows somebody to keep polluting
Mm.
while they buy credits and somebody else is going to
Yeah.
offset that, right? So there is some debate around that.
Yeah.
But in this specific context, we're using this as a financing tool. So we are physically putting carbon back into the ground. And there are some essential services, maybe you don't want a oil company to kind of pollute a huge amount there and
Mm.
buy our credits and offset that.
Mm.
But there may be a kind of essential service that is putting carbon out that you can offset by buying these credits. So carbon credits are of different forms. The earliest forms were this kind of wind and solar energy
Mm.
where you get a credit for not polluting more.
Mm.
Now it's largely tree planting is the form of carbon credits floating around the world where you plant trees, they grow, and they absorb carbon. And our biochar is actually physically putting carbon back into the ground.
Mm.
So the solar and all are only about $20 a ton now. Your tree planting ones are 50 to $80,
Mm.
and biochar credits go for between 160 and $200 because
Mm.
biochar is only the way you're putting carbon back in.
Right.
So if the biochar credits sell for above of $200, we can cover the cost of all this removal, restoration,
Mm.
livelihoods, farmers benefit, everything.
Right.
If they sell for less, then we'll need some amount of grant funding, or we'll need biochar itself to be sold
Mm.
for some amount of money to offset the cost.
Right.
But this, as a financial tool, it has huge potential to fund all of this work
Mm.
rather than constantly needing grant funding to remove this lantana on an ongoing basis.
Which actually brings me to the next question. So, you're talking about scaling up, right? And that would obviously involve some amount of private investment. But there could be pitfalls to having this private investment in the sense that lantana isn't it a limited resource? Even though it's invaded a vast tract of our land,
Yeah,
it's still a limited resource, right? So,
absolutely. So it's a limited resource, there's no doubt. The question is, when will we run out of lantana?
hmm.
So at the scale we are planning, which is close to 1,000 people in these 3-4 parks, 500 hectares per park per year,
Mm.
it'll take 50 years to clear all the lantana, right?
Okay.
So there is so much lantana out there
Mm.
that you need a very large scale kind of investment into this
Mm.
to make it happen. I'm not so worried about the investors. Nobody in the startup world, if you get your returns over 3-5 years, you're happy. Nobody's thinking 50 years.
50 years,
So
yeah.
it's more the people who are employed. If you're creating a livelihood for 1,000 people, what's going to happen to all these people in the long term?
Mm.
I really believe in 50 years, there'll be nobody willing to do this work.
Mm.
We'll have to go to completely automated processes to remove the lantana.
Right.
We won't have manual laborers who are willing to go cut. It's backbreaking hard work. So even there, we're looking at how we can improve the efficiency and
Mm.
reduce the kind of drudgery in the way they do that.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it is a long term problem, but it's not a short term problem.
Mm.
In the short term, we want to finish this resource as fast as we can.
Right.
Hopefully, in 50 years, there'll be lots of other solutions as well
Mm.
that come up. We would have hopefully reduced our consumption
Yeah.
and the rate at which we're using fossil fuels and putting carbon into the air,
Mm.
which is the primary thing. We have to do that. I mean, everything else is kind of more stopgap measures. So that's the hope over a more longer term period.
Right. And what does this kind of private investment look like for you? Where do you think these investments need to happen?
For the most part, right away, we are looking for investments through multiple partners as
Mm.
well into building up the ecosystem for this. See, the lantana elephants, we started with one elephant, two
Mm.
elephants, three elephants. Elephant family paid for them, and we slowly built up from a few people to 300 people.
Right.
In this, that's not the case. We need a big factory in the middle. That's going to need huge investment. That's
Mm.
going to have to set up first, and then we have a large number of people collecting biomass and sending into the
Right.
factory. So the trajectory is different. We need upfront quite a bit
Mm.
of capital. So it's, yeah, we have set up a company that is part owned by all the communities who are removing lantana, that is part owned by conservation organizations that will ensure restoration happens,
Mm.
and part owned by private equity. The thing is, equity investors are not going to get a huge return immediately on their investment. They have
Right.
to be willing to say that the return is that you're providing 1,000 jobs, you're clearing thousands of hectares of lantana per year.
Mm.
Because to clear those thousands of hectares of lantana per year, you need hundreds of crores of rupees anyway.
Right.
So that hundred of crores of rupees is saved.
Mm.
And the irony is that a whole lot of organizations are paying CSR money to clear lantana, not realizing that the problem is so huge that money is not making a difference.
Yeah.
It's just clearing, there's no monitoring, there's no evaluation, there's no year on year plan of is restoration happening.
Mm.
Like even we are not exactly sure how we should restore. We have a collaboration with NCBS, A-Tree, WWF, and us at the Shola Trust in doing experiments on how do we bring back grasses after we remove lantana.
Okay.
The honest truth is nobody knows.
Mm.
Most restoration ecologists have worked in very small patches of land for many years,
Mm.
and they are very perfectionist. But they spend lakhs or crores on each hectare. Now, when you say 500 hectares, you can't spend huge amounts of money. And as a philosophy, it's primarily trying to see how do we help the forests recover,
Recover. Yeah.
right? Help build resilience in that ecosystem to keep invaders out.
Mm.
So for me, a key is fire. This
Mm.
is quite kind of antithetical to most people in the conservation world, but not so much. More and more people are coming to it. Indigenous people in India have been burning for 50,000 years. Since
Mm.
people landed on this continent, they have been burning in some shape or form. If you burn carefully early in the season, you clear out the bottom biomass and
Mm.
undergrowth. You don't damage trees or even tree saplings.
Mm.
And with a little bit of rain that comes even in the summer, you have a flush of new grass.
Right.
So that cool season burning is highly beneficial. We know
Mm.
it even in forestry operations.
Mm.
A park like Kaziranga is burnt in rotation every year. Part of it is burnt.
Right.
The whole park is burnt. It's primarily grassland.
Mm.
So wherever they think of grassland, the government is okay to burn.
Mm.
But then they think of forest and there they don't want to burn. But this distinction is problematic. See,
Mm.
the global definition of FAO has of a forest is up to zero point 0.1 hectare per hectare. So that's 10% of the area can be trees and 90% can be open.
Right.
And that's still called a forest.
Mm.
So if 90% is open, that means that 90% is grass.
Yeah.
So what looks exactly the same, like a
Mm.
deciduous forest looks exactly the same as what we call a savanna in Africa.
Yeah.
Savanna in Africa is the same, primarily grasses, few trees.
Mm.
So these are the same ecosystems. The drier forests in India are essentially grassland savannas, is what Jayashree Ratnam argues very strongly. She's a well-known grass ecologist at
Okay.
NCBS. So if we are thinking of these, that we don't, the objective is not to have thick stand of trees.
Mm.
The objective is to have a healthy grassy layer that animals can eat.
Mm.
Then you need to bring back fire to all these landscapes urgently.
Right.
That's a big policy shift that needs to happen. Otherwise, a few NGOs or researchers
Mm.
trying to do it is not going to make much difference. But I think that is the key. You bring in fire, then you will bring in the grasses, and then you will have
Mm.
much better restoration outcomes in terms
Right.
of finally have we created palatable vegetation for herbivores. For me,
Mm.
that is the kind of objective we are moving towards.
Right.
Because a lot of people say lantana itself benefits some butterflies and
Hmm.
bulbuls, and it's true.
Hmm.
Bulbuls love, they thrive in lantana. It's full of
Okay.
bulbuls. But you have more bulbuls than you ever had in the history of time, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So is that necessarily the conservation objective you want? So
Hmm.
there are always trade-offs. It's not
Correct.
that like bulbuls will lose out habitat as we remove lantana. A
Hmm.
few butterflies may,
Hmm.
but a lot of species will gain habitat.
Hmm.
How do you balance this? That it's going to upset bulbuls is not a reason to not remove lantana.
Hmm.
So that kind of holistic thinking about these ecosystems is kind of lacking.
Hmm.
The colonial bias towards thinking of forests as trees is very much still there.
Hmm.
We really need to get around that,
Right.
um, and think more about the grasses and the understory.
Hmm.
And it's not a dual. It's not either forest or grassland.
Right.
You have forests with a grassy understory. That grassy
Hmm.
understory needs fire.
Yeah.
All the trees in this region are adapted to fire. There are studies from IISc also that talk about this. This is really nice kind of saying I keep liking to repeat. The Patnaikins in Mudumalai and Tamil
Hmm.
Nadu and the Soligas both have a saying that if you don't burn it, it will burn. So
Okay.
you should burn it.
Hmm.
And they also say it's forest needs a fire like a human needs a haircut.
Hmm.
Like you need that, otherwise it'll just become too much and unmanageable. And everyone kind of laughs and says a nice thing. But IISc had a study from 2016, Professor Sukumar's lab, that examined all the intense forest fires in South India.
Okay.
And they found all of them happen when a certain set of environmental and kind of biophysical variables come together. You need high wind speed,
Okay.
high ambient temperature, very low humidity, and large flammable biomass.
Okay.
Now, in a some days of summer, this happens. There will
Hmm.
always be very intense heat, very windy. You feel it very dry. You all
Hmm.
feel parched. On those days, there is always an inevitable dense fire in South India,
Hmm.
and devastating fire. It'll burn the like burns down the trees, everything.
Right.
Now, you can't control these environmental variables. What you can control is the biomass.
Hmm.
If you burn early in the season when these other variables are not there, it will go through, clear out the fire, then there'll be no destructive fires.
Right.
So the way to prevent the destructive fires that we all worried about is to bring back controlled fires.
Control files.
You cannot suppress, suppress,
Hmm.
suppress. It's going to become you're creating a tinderbox.
Hmm.
And everywhere in the world we are seeing this.
Correct.
Everywhere they suppress native burning
Hmm.
across Americas, across Canada. They have changed ecosystems that were all burnt by indigenous people for livestock
Hmm.
and wild animals. Like Americans used to burn landscapes for bison.
Hmm.
And that big open grassland was important for bison because they ate the bison. But it's important for the bison. If you
Hmm.
close it up, there'll be no bison left as well.
Yep.
So that same approach we really have to take in India, of taking a
Hmm.
much more long-term perspective, looking at like long-term ecology. It's
Hmm.
not like the baseline now is what we got in 1972 as a forest, and we think this is what we need to do. This is the set of
Yeah.
values. You should go back and look at ecology much more and think what is a forest? Why do we need to prioritize? Do we want more mammals? Do we want more bulbuls?
Hmm.
These are all kind of discussions that need to happen in government circles primarily
Yeah.
to decide how we need to restore. Like inherently, a grassland has much more mammals than a forest.
Right.
Like you take Kaziranga,
Hmm.
entirely grassland, 35 tigers per 100 square kilometers.
Hmm.
You take Wayanad, sorry, Periyar,
Hmm.
the rainforest part of it, nice, dense rainforest, quite uninvaded.
Hmm.
It's good, it's a healthy rainforest, one tiger per 100 square kilometers, right? So
Hmm.
35 times the number of tigers. So when you have all these tiger reserves, should you manage more for tigers
Hmm.
and mammals, or should you manage more for bulbuls and butterflies?
Right.
So I think forest departments have converged on we need to remove lantana,
Hmm.
but not on we need to bring back burning.
Hmm.
That idea has not set in,
Right.
and for me that is a key part of the puzzle. Or we're just going to remove, and other invasives are going to come back.
Hmm.
So when you remove, and invasive by definition or a weed likes disturbance. So weeds are always the first ones to colonize.
Hmm.
So you have even native invaders that are not alien invaders that come in and they completely take over.
Right.
They may get suppressed over time as others will outcompete, but the first responders come in and they completely take over. Those are also not palatable
Hmm.
because if they are palatable, everybody will come and eat them.
Correct.
So you need to, yeah, we really need to, like all the areas we've removed, we've seen secondary invasives only that have come back.
Hmm.
We've removed about 200 hectares of lantana, um, and for some places like in Wayanad, for 1 year it was a very nice grassy kind of open area. In the second, third year, it was taken over by Chromalina odorata, which is another invasive.
Okay.
So restoration is a very complex thing to do.
Hmm.
It's more monitoring and kind of taking an experimental approach. Nobody
Right.
says this is the right thing. Even if
Hmm.
you restore after 5 years, you may find something else has taken over.
Hmm.
Why is that? What can you do? It's more not trying to intensively manage, but it's much more hands-off approach of what small things can you tweak
Hmm.
to try to see if the ecosystem kind of is more resilient and is able
Right.
to keep invaders away.
Hmm. And where does the policy stand on this now? like your view on India's policy for maybe controlled burning, forest conservation. Where does it stand now, and where do we have to go?
So it's a state subject for the most part. So each
Hmm.
states are very different in their approach. This
Hmm.
is the challenge. All of central India, for example, Kana and all that, Madhya Pradesh, they burn regularly.
Hmm.
Tigers are a key part of their agenda.
Right.
They burn and they aggressively keep invasives out
Hmm.
because they manage for tigers. South India, the three states have been quite hands off as a philosophy, that they have not intensively done as much.
Hmm.
Uh, but all of them want to now.
Right.
But till now, the law itself is not clear on whether you can remove invasives and use it for tribals' livelihood or something commercial.
Hmm.
Because historically, we fought very hard to stop the commercial exploitation of forests. Under colonial kind of the regimes, forests were basically timber factories.
Yeah.
So we fought a lot to have the Wildlife Protection Act and change that perception of forests from being kind of completely for production
Hmm.
to think of them as intrinsic value and conservation, which
Yeah.
is a very good thing that happened. But does that mean absolutely no use,
Hmm.
right, of even invasive species?
Hmm.
We've almost gone too far the other extreme. So we need to allow indigenous peoples kind of low intervention use of these landscapes
Right.
and management of regimes that were in place before kind of British people arrived.
Hmm.
So if you look at fire history, all the parks in South India, except the very wet forests,
Hmm.
there's been no fire.
Right.
Like your rainforests have all not had fire,
Hmm.
but the drier and kind of deciduous forests have all had fire.
Hmm.
You need to bring them back. Fire is not really only preventive fires they do by the roadsides.
Hmm.
Otherwise, there's no kind of fire for the sake of restoration. It's
Hmm.
only to prevent fire that they do it by the roadsides.
Right.
I think they need to expand that quite a bit to start doing fires everywhere as a restoration tool.
Hmm.
Um, and each state has allowed now, like Karnataka was the first of the South Indian states to actively encourage private entities, not even tribals, to come in and take out invasive
Right.
species. The thing is, it's not valuable. It's like I was saying, the biomass is too expensive for any private entity to want to take it up. But for a community based kind of enterprise, it will work very well. Tamil Nadu has also kind of allowed it now, but
Okay.
it's not uniform as a policy. It's
Hmm.
dependent too much on individual officers. So some very proactive officers may decide, let's do this, but
Okay.
another officer may come and say, no, no, as per Wildlife Protection Act, you can't remove anything.
Hmm.
There should be no commercial activity. There's a Supreme Court ruling,
Hmm.
T.N. Godavarman, very famous ruling that says not a blade of grass shall be removed, kind of thing.
Okay.
So they're stuck with that. They'll quote that and say nothing
Hmm.
should be removed. So there is an urgent need to harmonize this policy and very clearly have amendments to the Wildlife Protection Act is ideal.
Hmm.
Then there is no issue for the states to follow. But otherwise, I have a more uniform policy that allows people to remove and starts burning at scale.
Right.
I think that really needs to happen.
Sure. So we'll move on to this other aspect of your work, which is where you investigate how people and elephants kind of share space. Could you take us through how you do this study and what your process is?
Yeah, so it started for my PhD. I kind of growing up in the Nilgiris, elephants and lantana were the two biggest problems we
Mm.
saw.
Mm.
Like elephants are coming back into human habitation a lot more. They're causing a lot more damage. And the forests we have been driving through since we were kids, you see that lantana is taking over more and more. And everywhere,
Mm.
agricultural areas, reserve forests, everywhere lantana is kind of proliferating. So how do you? So we worked on these two in almost in parallel before when we started off,
Mm.
say 10, 15 years ago. So for elephants, the primary thing was elephants don't only live in forests. We
Mm.
all knew this growing up in the Nilgiris.
Yeah.
But the dominant idea is that nature exists only in protected areas. So wilderness is protected areas and human use areas is no animals.
Mm.
But animals are coming out more and more. So it was more how to understand what's going on with people and elephants in Gudlur. That was the focus of my kind of early research. And what you found is, for the most part, elephants are moving around every day harmlessly. Every time they move through a plantation, people are all very excited. They
Mm.
stop and watch, and they all will kind of get quite excited, like a
Mm.
tourist goes into a forest and sees an elephant and gets excited, right? Very often they call a lot of people, and that becomes almost a problem. That
Mm.
there are too many people, and then the elephants feel pressured and things
Mm.
like that. But people are excited by seeing elephants every day. Occasionally, elephants damage.
Mm.
They break down houses. They damage crops. They occasionally even kill people in
Mm.
accidental encounters.
Mm.
So when any of these happen, it's reported as news and it becomes mainstream. When
Right.
people are quietly watching elephants, it's never considered news.
Mm.
So this idea that there is conflict is slightly exaggerated more than there is conflict.
Right.
That was the kind of early premise of the work. So I try to understand the idea of tolerance. So
Mm.
most indigenous people believe if you're living in an area with elephants, you can't plant bananas. Elephants will eat it,
Mm.
obviously. So you don't plant bananas. So you
Mm.
don't do things that will conflict with animals for the most part,
Right.
and that's a coping strategy.
Mm.
Um, and there's also this idea of what is an elephant.
Mm.
So in the kind of Western Judeo-Christian worldview, human beings are right on top, a very anthropocentric worldview.
Right.
All of animals and everything is below.
Hmm.
And we conserve because we have a kind of moral obligation to look after species
Hmm.
less than ourselves. In the Hindu kind of pantheon, Ganesha is, of course, the god.
Hmm.
So it's reversed entirely.
Right.
So you worship Ganesha, so you don't kind of destroy
Hmm.
Ganesha. And number of animals, the
Hmm.
Hindu pantheon is huge.
Yeah.
You'll find every species of animal in some form of a god somewhere.
Right.
Um, so that's the other extreme.
Hmm.
And then you have the Adivasi or the indigenous ontology, almost as it's called, where animals are thought of as other than human persons. So
Okay.
they're almost equal with you. You
Hmm.
express expect reciprocity and mutualism in your interaction. You should behave well with nature, nature will behave well with
Very
you. If
interesting.
you behave badly, it will behave badly.
Hmm.
But if an elephant behaves badly with you,
Hmm.
you're in your right to behave badly back with it. And
Hmm.
it's only individual elephants.
Okay.
They only think that certain elephants are bad elephants, most elephants are good elephants, or certain
Okay.
elephants are very good elephants that are like humans,
Hmm.
and they're very peaceful and all, very nice elephants.
Hmm.
And that understanding of elephants as individuals for me is vital.
Hmm.
That allows you to coexist much better. If you think of it as a god also, and the god keeps on bashing you, first you will say, okay, divine retribution,
Hmm.
my house got bashed because I did something wrong,
Hmm.
or a lot of that narrative you see in the media also. Somebody
Right.
chased an elephant, so it came back, and
Hmm.
that is a good way to explain it in the beginning. But if it continuously keeps damaging your crops and your rice, at some point you will say this is too much,
Hmm.
and you will push back. And you quietly, you see in the northeast in particular, there's a lot of poisoning of elephants that happens suddenly,
Okay.
right? Um, so this indigenous ontology is really interesting, and I think biology has to kind of evolve to understand animals as individuals.
Hmm.
Biology is part of the problem in that they only want to generalize for a species. If
Hmm.
you talk about individuals, it's anthropomorphizing, and
Hmm.
that's not considered a healthy thing to do. You look for generalizable patterns rather than explore complexity and understand individuals.
Right.
So it is changing now. More and more people are thinking about animals as individuals, but otherwise, this was not the focus of biology.
Hmm.
It's assumed that animals behave in very Darwinian ways. You're only looking for food, reproductive success, and water,
Hmm.
really.
Hmm.
That's all that matters. They try to
Right.
explain all of why animals do anything because of reproductive success. You see, every documentary also is finally that went in search of
Correct.
food, water, and
Yeah.
finding a mate kind of thing. But obviously, it's much more complex than that,
Hmm.
right? And the individual elephants, we know this. Like there's a garbage dump, for example,
Okay.
huge food source. Certain individuals chose to go there. Certain individuals thought too much hassle. I don't want the hassle of people chasing me. And
Hmm.
certain tuskers didn't go next to it.
Hmm.
So it's not only this. Of course, animals need food, water, and reproductive success.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more going on in terms of how animals are making decisions.
Right.
And that was the focus of my PhD for the major part. But for me, elephants are only kind of the tip of the iceberg.
Hmm.
The fundamental basis of conservation, in my view, is flawed.
Hmm.
What we're trying to do is saying we'll put nature there and we'll take the rest for ourselves,
Hmm.
and we are free to destroy this. We'll have very stringent laws there, no human use, we'll move everybody out, nobody can
Hmm.
do anything, but we can do whatever we want in other areas. This is a wrong idea to
Right.
me, fundamentally, because we are creating unhealthy environments for ourselves to live in. Forget everybody else. From a very kind of personal and yeah, from a very personal perspective, also selfish perspective, we need nature around us,
Correct.
right? There are big studies, like huge studies, large number of people that show if people are exposed to greenery outside the windows when they're recovering from surgery, they recover much faster than those who are not exposed to even see greenery.
Hmm.
Forget in, experiencing nature and
Hmm.
walking in a forest, just seeing a
Seeing
plant
it.
around you
Hmm.
helps at some way in your mental status.
Hmm.
If people go for a walk in a forest, even if they've never been before, and they come back saying it was horrible, it was
Hmm.
hot, and it was
Hmm.
sticky, and there were mosquitoes, if you measure cortisol levels or levels of stress in their body, it is reduced.
Right.
So even though mentally we have not ever engaged with the forest, our bodies still know that we need nature around us. So for me, we really have to break down this binary of nature and society
Hmm.
and think of those are protected areas. Here is free for
Anything
humans to do
goes.
whatever they
Yeah.
want. To think of the world as a gradient.
Hmm.
There will be urban areas, which is largely people. There will be forests or intact habitats, and they need to be protected.
Hmm.
You can't have mining and large corporations and mainstream development happening in
Yeah.
those areas. And then everything else is a gradient. So elephants can't really live in a city, or tigers can't live in a city,
Hmm.
and most modern human beings cannot live in a forest.
Right.
But a few people may be able to live in a forest who are still living well.
Hmm.
A few animals may be able to live in a city
Yeah.
that are able to adapt. Like you look at foxes in London, they are through the roof, right? They are doing really well in
Yeah.
a city. So there will be animals that can live in a city, but in between you have to think of that world as a gradient. Very
Hmm.
intense agriculture that we need for food security. You can't have elephants there.
Hmm.
Tea and coffee plantations, and that's a major reason why you have coexistence unfolding in places like Hassan, Coorg, Nilgiris, because it's tea and coffee plantations elephants don't eat.
Yeah.
If you have paddy fields, people can't tolerate
Hmm.
elephants. Your whole year's livelihood is going to go in one night. You
Correct.
can't say, yes, I'll put up with it easily.
Hmm.
So there you have to keep elephants out.
Hmm.
So we have to kind of think of this zonation really as an approach and change the way we think about conservation. We have
Right.
to have conservation plans for Bangalore.
Hmm.
Water, air pollution. Like if you have trees, large stomata trees, they'll absorb your air pollution a lot more. Your
Correct.
indices will improve.
Hmm.
And you ban so much on tobacco and stuff like that. So much energy is going in banning tobacco.
Hmm.
There's something positive from smoking. There's nothing positive from walking around in Delhi or Bangalore, but it's going to knock more off your life,
Yeah.
right? On average life expectancy than smokers.
Yeah.
So why are we not talking about these things? Why are we
Hmm.
not talking about public health crisis? And why is this not a conservation problem,
Right.
right? Like rat spreading, for
Hmm.
example, spreading disease
Hmm.
is a conservation problem. You have created ideal habitat for rats,
Right.
and they're proliferating.
Hmm.
Mosquitoes, same thing.
Correct.
So in a sense, you can really think of many of these public health problems as conservation problems, that
Hmm.
we are not creating appropriate habitats for ourselves and others to live in,
Hmm.
or habitat that we kind of create by mistake
Hmm.
of bad waste management is creating a habitat for other species that are problematic,
Hmm.
and it's upsetting these balances. So for me, yeah, we really need to rethink the conservation paradigm itself.
Hmm.
That's not going to happen soon, and not definitely not in India, but definitely not anywhere in the world.
Right.
It's not an Indian problem. It's actually largely an American problem that was exported to the
Hmm.
world. And look there itself, right? There, the first national park in the world, Yellowstone, is very celebrated.
Hmm.
And now you have a president, and there's no political will to protect any of these spaces, and all these laws are being undone.
Upturned. Yeah.
So if you disconnect people completely from nature, put them all in cities,
Hmm.
why will they ever care about nature, right? So fundamentally, the premise of conservation of trying to disconnect people from nature is wrong in my view. You
Hmm.
have to find ways in which people can engage with nature more and more,
Right.
reconnect them. It's very challenging in a country like India because we have so many people.
Yeah.
If everyone wants to go to parks, it's not possible.
Correct.
Like Bandipur, Mudonlai will get overcrowded.
Hmm.
But you have to start thinking of how do you interact with nature in other forms. You don't
Hmm.
only have to go to Bandipur or Nagarhole to interact with nature.
Yeah.
There is nature around you in Bangalore. You have to learn to look for it.
Correct.
And we have to really promote that a lot more.
Hmm.
So in this global scale, I feel India is really exciting
Hmm.
because it is the only large country that has such a huge density of people, but the number of elephants, tigers, lions, rhinos have all arguably doubled in the last 30, 40 years.
Hmm.
Humans have also doubled,
Yeah.
but animals have also doubled. So we
Right.
are somehow getting it right in some sense.
Hmm.
But also, it's a huge cost. Local people are really suffering with animals. We have to think about how we can balance that better.
Hmm.
But for me, we are kind of leading globally in this idea of coexistence, and that we are able to tolerate animals and plants to a large extent much better than most of the developed world.
Hmm.
Like a simple thing like you get sick. For most of us, your first thing is some ginger water, maybe.
Hmm.
We still know that.
Yeah.
Everybody else, first thing is reach for some Tylenol or some
Hmm.
other pharmaceutical product that some company makes somewhere,
Yeah.
right? So you've kind of relinquished your very basic right to health to a company somewhere. You've outsourced it,
Yeah.
and you've totally forgotten how I can look after myself with things around me before I reach for that. So yeah, I'm quite hopeful, and that's the whole idea of the great elephant migration in
Hmm.
some sense. They are telling people around the world there are people in India who are living with elephants.
Hmm.
What can you live with? Who
Hmm.
lives around you, right?
Yeah.
Even in Bangalore, when we had the exhibition, that was the kind of theme. Very few people will get it. Like
Hmm.
95% will come and say the elephants are beautiful and go away.
Right.
That's the first hook,
Hmm.
right? But as you engage more and more, hopefully you will get these deeper subtexts that
Hmm.
are in the exhibition and what we're trying to say,
Yeah.
that we really need to think about nature very differently.
Hmm.
We really need to reconnect with nature everywhere. Like for me, a great conservation project will be herb gardens across Bangalore,
Hmm.
medicinal herbs. All the municipality should start very easy. Everybody compulsory must plant something on your balcony
Hmm.
and must grow one plant.
Hmm.
If a child grows one plant, you know how hard it is to grow a plant.
Yeah.
You'll change your approach to waste and food and consumption.
Right.
You know that it's so hard to grow this plant, right? So I really feel that reconnection should really happen in urban areas more than rural areas.
Rural
I feel
areas.
conservation needs a lot more focus in urban areas
Hmm.
rather than the focus is entirely there. Even when we think about coexistence, most people think of coexistence as mitigating conflict at the edge of parks.
Hmm.
Like animals are coming there, that has to be done. Animals are coming and impacting local people. We
Yeah.
have to do something there.
Hmm.
But we have to do more in the cities almost. We have to promote nature much more in the cities. What
Hmm.
is the bird life? What is the tree life? What herbs do we have around us? All
Yeah.
of that. Um, but yeah, I keep on ending with India is much better than everywhere else in
Hmm.
the world, in my view. Like even your very organic and woke people around in the global north depend on highly capitalized industrial systems to get their organic this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Here, there's nobody trying to grow it themselves. But here, it's not like that. All your organic aunties in Bangalore are trying to grow things on their roof, which
Yeah.
is very positive and exciting. We need policies and kind of government action to promote that. And enhance it and give subsidies. Like Kerala is doing it. Like there
Hmm.
are subsidies at the level of panchayats
Hmm.
to do backyard gardens,
Okay.
right? So you plant something, grow it, you learn to compost, you
Hmm.
reduce waste, you won't have rat problems. See, if we
Hmm.
separate all our waste entirely at home, there's going to be none of these
Correct.
this thing, mosquito problems.
Yeah.
So I'm quite hopeful at the end of the day. Though our population is a huge problem,
Yeah.
it forces us to think differently. We cannot just go dump our garbage somewhere. Wherever you dump, there are people there who are going to protest. So
Correct.
garbage is going to be a problem. We're going to have to learn to segregate and reduce.
Hmm.
Right? We're not going to be able to say we'll bury it in landfill and everything looks clean and we're happy,
Hmm.
which is what the global north does. Or they export it to kind of third world countries and
Yeah.
let them deal with it. So yeah, hopefully that this coexistence paradigm and this shift is happening in India. Hopefully governments will kind of take it up more and embrace it rather
Hmm.
than continue with that old school. No, no, we want to separate out kind of more.
Right.
And I feel we can kind of offer solutions to the world.
Hmm. I think you mentioned about how the indigenous populations identify elephants as individuals, and one of the things I got really curious about while reading your work was about this local celebrity called Ganeshan. What kind of role do such individual elephants play in uh, establishing this gradient that you spoke about, right? About getting people to understand nature more and stuff like that.
It's a complex one. So there are these very habituated individuals everywhere.
Hmm.
If you look on social media, also just search for Ganesh Ram, you'll find one chap in Guwahati, for example,
Hmm.
who's living in Guwahati city for the most part.
Okay.
Everywhere there was Madhukare Maharaj in Coimbatore, there
Hmm.
was one Rowdy Ranga here. There were elephants. Rowdy Ranga was around Bannerghatta, that area, South
Okay.
Bangalore. So everywhere there are elephants who are learning more and more to live in human use
Hmm.
landscapes. They are changing their behavior considerably. There's a
Hmm.
colleague Nishant who's done some amazing work on looking at all male herds.
Okay.
Like traditionally, females lived in herds, males lived solitary, but they're
Hmm.
coming together.
Hmm.
So they are important in that they force us to rethink the deeper paradigm under which we build conservation.
Hmm.
But those individuals are causing huge damage as well.
Hmm.
Some of them
Hmm.
in a Bangalore landscape, like
Hmm.
Ganeshan was not causing any damage
Hmm.
because that landscape you can live with elephants.
Hmm.
But outside here, you can't really, like, it's all farmers growing edible crops.
Correct.
So the elephants are coming out for crop raiding,
Hmm.
and that's not really a sustainable thing in my view. But otherwise, these elephants exist everywhere. Munar has one, Padayappa. He was featured on
Okay.
National Geographic also. He
Okay.
went and played football one day with kids there. Wild elephant, right?
Okay.
So these elephants are kind of local celebrities
Hmm.
everywhere. People are very enthusiastic about them. But you have to be careful in not saying we'll never capture an elephant. Like if an elephant kills a lot of people,
Hmm.
you can't then say no, don't do anything, let it be.
Hmm.
Elephants deserve. I mean, you can. We do. Elephants do have a right to live there, but you have to balance that a little carefully.
Right.
If an elephant comes into Bangalore, they'll capture it immediately.
Hmm.
Nobody will say elephant has a right to be here,
Yeah.
right? But if the elephant is killing 10 people in rural Karnataka somewhere, and you
Hmm.
say no, no, don't do anything
Hmm.
and all that, then what happens is that you break down tolerance. Um, so understanding these personalities are vital. So in the Nilgiris, for example, in Gudlur, there are the highly habituated males like Ganeshan who don't do damage. People are happy with them where they
Hmm.
move around. There are a smaller percentage of males that do a lot of damage. They are causing almost all the conflict.
Okay.
And 85% of the elephants in the Nilgiris were not interacting with people in
Okay.
Gudlur.
Hmm.
So the elephants are using Gudlur but not interacting with people.
Hmm.
So actually, it's only about 6 or 8% of the elephants. And in that case, it was about 150 elephants. That's like 9 individuals
Hmm.
who are causing all the damage.
Okay.
So if you radio collar them proactively, then you can monitor them much better.
Hmm.
But yeah, the celebrity peaceful elephants, the bold and the blasé as we call them, who exist everywhere, they are great in that people admire them everywhere.
Hmm.
They have like fan followings and all that going behind them. But what also is that they teach other elephants to come where they are going.
Hmm.
Now this guy is very peaceful and he knows how to navigate a city. The guys who come behind him don't know.
Hmm.
They'll bash down cars and they'll knock over things and
Hmm.
they'll knock houses down and stuff like that. So it's not easy to say that we should encourage these elephants more and more.
Hmm.
We still need boundaries somewhere where elephants don't really come. There should be elephant exclusion zones definitely, where you need to prioritize human food production or kind of intense urban areas. But otherwise, in many of these coexistence landscapes, these are kind of icons for celebrating coexistence.
Hmm.
Wayanad also, which is highly political, had an
Hmm.
elephant called Manian that everybody loved.
Hmm.
Nobody had an issue with Manian.
Hmm.
So if you allow for that, but the government doesn't. For them, elephants are elephants. So either
Hmm.
you have to capture if it's an elephant problem, you have to start capturing elephants and
Hmm.
moving them out.
Hmm.
So it's very binary again there. Like either let all the elephants be or you try to remove the elephants. Like
Right.
Hassan, they removed all the elephants, which is a very
Hmm.
bad outcome.
Hmm.
But if you're okay to remove individual elephants that are killing a lot of people, then they will tolerate the others much better.
Correct.
And that allows room, like in Nilgiris, 160 elephants in Gurlur.
Hmm.
If those nine only you manage intensively, then people will put up with all the 160 better. But if you don't do anything and say, oh, it's a local people's problem, they
Hmm.
are chasing elephants, they are planting crops, so we're not going to do anything, then that tolerance completely breaks down. And then they don't want any of the elephants. All 160,
Right.
they'll start demanding capture.
Hmm.
And at some point, when it becomes too much, it'll tip.
Hmm.
Politicians like the chief minister will get involved and say, no, it's too much.
Hmm.
So many people are dying, capture all the elephants.
Hmm.
So you don't want to reach those extremes. You want to manage this better before it reaches that extreme situation.
Right. So, if the Lantana camera had a personality, how would you describe it in one word?
It'll be one of those great global leaders like conquerors who Alexander the Great, or one of these major type A personalities who are very aggressively going out and conquering the world. So
Hmm.
it's like a trait that we value in human beings, right? A very the go-getter types who
Hmm.
are out there, very active, full of energy. But in a forest system, and maybe even in our society, we don't want too many of these personalities. We want people who are more introspective, humble,
Right.
things like that. But yeah, a very aggressive type A personality, I would say.
What is the biggest misconception that people have about the Lantana?
I think the majority of people don't know lantana at all.
Hmm.
For those who know it, they assume it's universally bad. And they all complain about lantana being in gardens and in kind of potted plants. You still can buy lantana, but you have these colorful lantana
Hmm.
hybrids that only propagate vegetatively. There's no seed,
Hmm.
and I still think those are good plants to have in a house because they don't need water,
Hmm.
they don't need much care, they're not going to spread into the
Hmm.
forest. So yeah, this universally lantana is bad, we're going to eradicate it, is not going to work. It's been
Hmm.
here for so long and it's there. It's a species complex with so many versions. It's not going to go.
Hmm.
So we have to more work towards managing lantana rather than trying to eradicate it.
Right.
And more lantana in the herb garden, in a garden, is not a problem really.
Hmm.
If it's the single colored lantana,
Hmm.
it's not this multiple colored lantana. Those don't produce seeds.
Okay. One big lesson you've learned from working with indigenous people in the Nilgiris.
I think that you have to slow down. Like life is too fast for
Hmm.
all of us. Even me, who lives in the Nilgiris,
Hmm.
the pace of life is very fast.
Hmm.
Slowing down and taking a breath and enjoying stuff around you, not meeting all your deadlines, little pushing everything. I think that's been my biggest learning and my struggle to adapt, because something I value, but I am very kind of trying to move at a great pace and meet all these deadlines, but slow down a bit in life.
One tool or technology that you would not want to be without when you're in the field.
I think it's primarily my phone now. It
Okay.
doubles up as camera,
Hmm.
GPS, whatever. Everything almost works in
Hmm.
a phone. Modern phones have made a lot of other equipments redundant. So yeah, it's as simple as the phone.
One myth about human elephant coexistence that your research has helped debunk.
I think the idea that elephants can live everywhere and you need
Hmm.
to let elephants go everywhere.
Hmm.
Even the courts put object to fences and all that coming up, but elephants can't live everywhere. As much as I want elephants to coexist with people, I'm very clear it's not possible everywhere.
Hmm. Thank you so much for your time, Tarsh, this and for making these tough conservation conversations so like accessible to people.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. Thanks.